to have you with us.
Okay, I think it's going. Pause, stop recording. Okay.
I would love to put my camera on, but I'm juggling like 10 things at once with kids.
Okay.
So I've got guys on
Okay.
No, you're good.
It's
But
good
I'm
to hear your voice.
I'm here for sure and paying attention.
That's great.
Thank you.
Awesome. Yeah, so I didn't know, I know we've all been kind of making introductions, but I didn't know if we wanted to kind of just briefly go through an introduction to just, say a little bit about yourself. I can start. I'm Sam Morden. I am a current graduate student at UNF, and I'm going to graduate in May through the BA MA Accelerated program. This is my 5th and final year at UNF. It has been delightful. It has been eventful, definitely through the pandemic, but we're here. We're going to graduate. And yeah, I've been a graduate assistant. I'm currently helping TA for a class with Dr. Howell, which is wonderful, and working in the Writing Center, which is also wonderful. So I'm just happy to be here as a part of EGO. Thank you. I will mute myself now.
I'll jump in. I'm Jennifer Dunn. I'm graduating this summer. I'm an older student who returned after a long time away and just loving it. And just recently warmed up pretty firmly to the idea of pursuing my master's in rhetoric and composition. So I'm really excited and will just soak up everything you guys have to share. I'm very eager to learn all I can. So hello.
Thanks, Jennifer.
Sure.
I'm Betsy Neese. I'm a professor here in the Department of English, and I celebrate diversity and inclusion. I don't care who says it's not okay. Speaking from Florida. She suddenly struck down. Ugh. Someone else?
I'll go. Hi, my name is Misty Fuller. I'm currently a Marion L. Brittain Fellow at Georgia Institute of Technology. I graduated from UNF master's program with CompRet in 2015. I adjuncted there, was a visiting instructor there for a couple of years, and was the Writing Center office manager there. And then I left in 2018 to get my PhD at LSU in English, focus in CompRet, and a minor in communication studies.
I can jump in. No, you want to go ahead?
I'm sorry.
Go for it. You're good.
My name is Stephanie Rountree. I'm assistant professor of English at the University of North Georgia. I am UNF class of 2011 MA. Woohoo! I actually just received notice from the president of my institution that I was awarded tenure and promotion this year. So effective.
Wow.
Yeah, I can't believe it. I mean, tenure isn't real in Georgia, but we're still celebrating anyway because I did all of the work and I still achieved the thing. It just isn't real anymore. But that becomes effective in spring. My scholarship is primarily in American literature after 1865, especially gender studies, yay, critical race theory, and also especially Southern studies. Keith Cartwright was one of my fiercest and strongest advocates while I was down there. He's one of my favorite people still now. So yeah, that's me. I went from one University of North to another one. I just went a little norther.
So my name is Dominic Robin. I'm first year PhD at St. Louis University. So I graduated in 2018 from the master's program at UNF. And then soon after that, went to Peru, lived in Peru for a couple of years, taught there, did some things, and then came back to the United States August of last year when I started my PhD. It's a joint PhD program in English and bioethics, which is a new addition. I don't even know if I've talked to you about that yet, Betsy.
You haven't told me.
No. I mean to. I haven't we're still putting all the paperwork through and everything. But it's kind of just like I'm doing both of the PhD programs, and then we'll do one dissertation. And so just started that and scheduled to finish, I don't know, sometime in 5-ish years. We'll see.
Chloe?
Yeah, hi. I'm Chloe. I'm in my last year, about to start my last year as a bachelor student at UNF. And I plan on applying right away into the master's program here. And I'm pretty early in, deciding to pursue higher education, so I'm still kind of figuring out what path I want to take and kind of learning what I don't know. So I can't wait to hear everything you guys have to say about your experiences and everything.
That's great. Erica?
Hi, everyone. I'm Erica Saffer. I got my MFA in creative writing from the University of Tampa. My bachelor's is from Flagler. I am the director of the Jacks by Jacks Literary Festival here in Jacksonville, Florida. Yeah, so we are doing, speaking of critical race, we're actually hosting a banned book bash tomorrow where we have 250 books off of the banned book list that are going to go into tiny libraries that were created by the Yellow House, 904 Word, and Alternate Routes. Yeah, so like, yes to all of that. And amidst all of this craziness, I have opened up some time in my life to looking at doctoral programs to continue my credentials. So that's why I'm here.
Great. That's great.
Thanks.
Awesome. Wow. Well, thank you. That sounds amazing. That's
Yeah, I can't wait.
That's a great project.
Yeah.
That's great. Yeah.
Thanks.
So I didn't know, if I may, unless anyone, I don't see any questions in the chat. So I just wanted to open it up with like maybe the kind of decision to pursue a PhD, because I know that there is obviously it's a great thing to accomplish. It's a great feat, and it's also something that also comes with a lot of challenges. And so I think like I've spoken with different professors who have differing opinions on the pursuit of a PhD, and some are a little bit like more skeptical, and and others are very, very encouraging. And so I just wanted to know kind of maybe how that decision was, and kind of the positives that have come from that decision.
Should we start with proximity to it? So maybe Dominic, Misty, and then I?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So I guess my advice would be proceed with caution. And I think a lot of people will tell you that same type of thing. A couple things to think about is, what are you hoping to get out of a program? If you're not enjoying your master's, it's very similar. I would say if you're not enjoying what you're doing right now, it's probably a good idea to take a break, set that aside, work on some other things. And I really enjoyed, I know it's not for everyone, but I enjoyed the gap time that I had between finishing my master's and starting on my PhD, because I was able to do a lot during that time. I was able to work on some projects that I wanted to. I was able to strengthen my CV too, so that I could get like the best offer available as far as where to go to get my PhD. But that's as negative as I'll be. I think that if you're okay with education without kind of knowing what's going to be on the other end, just you should go in knowing that. I think that there are things available, alt-ac, or within academia. Sometimes it won't always be tenure track positions. Sometimes you'll be teaching at a university. And if you're okay with that, I would just say you need to be okay with whatever doors open up once you're finished. And as long as you're okay with that, as long as you're not going in with like, I want one particular thing, and if that doesn't happen, I am going to regret all of that time that I put into my PhD, then I think there's a lot of value in the process of, continuing your education, being pushed, being around people who are going to, I don't know, love the same things that you love. And, working on projects is a lot of fun as well. So that's my proceed with caution, but also be a little optimistic response.
Yeah, I actually agree with a lot of what you just said, Dominic.
Mhm.
So for me, coming to the PhD was kind of messy. Like halfway through my master's, I actually left for a couple of years, and then came back and found composition and rhetoric, and I just loved it. So for me, the decision really came down to like, I just want to be able to continue to do this. So I did kind of hang out at UNF for a while, maybe longer than I should have. But I really can't stress enough what Dominic said about being able to be flexible with what you want to do with the PhD. Because the dream is, I want a tenure track job at a tier 1 institution, right? Like that's what you want, but so does everybody else. And I'll tell you this, in my program, we had about 5 Victorianists graduating within like a 2-year period. And the MLA jobs list had 1 or 2 Victorian jobs. So you want to, I mean, if it's something you want to pursue and you don't want to be flexible with that, you want to kind of be realistic about what you're pursuing. It is a lot of work. It is a lot of stress. For 4 years, well, I did mine in 4 years. The average humanities PhD is about 6. It's a lot. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of money. So you have to be clear on like, yes, I absolutely want this. And so it can be a challenge. And I'm not saying that to scare you. I had really great mentors at UNF who were very upfront about this when I said I wanted to pursue this. And I had a few colleagues who weren't aware when they got into the program. And I could kind of see like the shock coming up. But at the end of the day, you know, I was flexible about how I kind of wanted to end up with it. And I've been very happy. Like it was tough, but I don't regret doing it. So it just depends, you know, what is your end game here? Because you can enjoy your program for sure. I had plenty of great times at my program. But at some point it does kind of end. you know, what are you doing this for?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with both of those. I think the only thing that I would add is that the best way to make sure that if you are okay with knowing that there's probably, I'm just going to be honest, statistically speaking, if your master's is from UNF, you're likely not landing one of the 12 tenure track R1 positions that are available out there. And that is no offense to anyone on this call. The tenure track professorate is 30% of the jobs out there, period. Of the people teaching college, only 30-something% of them are on the tenure track, and only 24% of them are actually tenured. So, right, like this is not 30 years ago. It's not even 10 years ago. So without a shadow of a doubt, institutional stature of the institution that you come from, it matters even more now than it ever did. And I think that if you really have your heart set on that, like top tier tenure track position, then your institutional stature from UNF to your PhD program you need to be jumping a skyscraper, like send out those applications really high. My PhD is from Georgia State University, and it's an R1 institution. It's the most diverse R1 institution in the nation. It's won all these awards in innovation. And I have been placed in one of the most prestigious institutions that our graduates have placed a literature scholar in, not Ret Comp. Our Ret Comp department is super competitive. And so they've placed in a lot of places higher than UNG. But I just want to, like, full disclosure, if literature is your gig and you're going out there, Ret Comp is a bit more employable on the R1 tenure track position than say literary studies is. And a lot of that just has to do with attacks on humanities and defunding, and Ret Comp positions itself really well as a professional degree, right? And preparation for publishing and such, in a way that literary studies really has to sort of fight against this attack on humanities in more significant way. I hope I answered that question correctly. The answer is it's changed my life and I loved it, but I'm making less now than I did when I started my PhD program. I took out a lot of debt to get that PhD. It took me 6 years to finish it, and I landed at a commuter campus, which is a satellite branch of the UNG, on the tenure track, but teaching comp and a 4.4. So just full disclosure.
Yeah, no, thank you all. I really appreciate it. I think that's something that I know I have kind of thought about a lot myself, and I know other students have, of kind of these, you know, really difficult questions about academia and about, you know, especially with like how competitive things are. And so obviously, I think this is something a lot of English students and all students really would like to do, and it obviously is so much work and so much effort. And so, and it's such a small part of the population that really has a PhD. I mean, that's a very small number of people. And so I think it's important to think about those decisions with your professors and having, and you know, having people who have different opinions and can really tell you the reality of things as well. Do we have any question? I have more questions, but I just want to check in with our wonderful audience here.
I have some questions. This is Jennifer. I'm definitely more interested in the professional track. I have an eye towards grant writing, or technical writing, or perhaps medical writing. And so I've just sort of opened my eyes to the possibilities of a PhD program, but really focused on the master's. But if anybody could speak to professional opportunities for a PhD program, that would be incredibly helpful to me. Thank you.
By professional opportunities, do you mean like alt-ac? Like you get the PhD and then what's outside of academics?
Correct. Yes. Sorry. Yeah.
Since I'm comp Brett and you mentioned tech writing, we actually do have a lot of people in my fellowship right now, and have previously, that have had an opportunity either in their master's program or in this fellowship to teach tech writing and kind of get training in that. So you still kind of have to, in the conversations I've had with these people, you still kind of have to get your foot in the door and network, right? Because a PhD, right, is impressive, but they also want to know that you have an idea of like what that job actually is. Right. So if you get a chance to like teach tech comm, or obviously take classes in it, or just talk to people in that sort of position, it's a doable transition. I don't know if you need a PhD necessarily to get into that, but it is a pathway that I've seen quite a few colleagues take.
Thank you so much.
One question that I had, and thank you, for this, but I didn't know, like, for the UNF MA program in particular, or even, kind of our undergraduate, like the university itself, ways that you think that UNF was able to maybe help you prepare for applying to a PhD, or kind of having that experience, or what resources should someone, a UNF student, kind of look to kind of make those decisions and pursue that path?
Well, when I was there, Nick DeVillers had just been hired.
Mm-hmm.
And Professor DeVillers was a godsend. Just having a pair of eyes on my documents who had just come off the market. I mean, there's no, and I don't mean job market, I mean like the PhD application field. There is no substitute for a person who has recently done it to look at your documents, which is not a knock at those of us like me who are more than 10 years away from that, right? We did it too. We know what it's like. We also are on boards of graduate admissions. So we have that really important perspective of who is actually reading that application when it goes out. But there's nothing more valuable than a person who just survived the gauntlet. So to the greatest extent possible, talk to the folks who have just done it. They are amazing.
To that, I would add, so the mistake I made my first year was that I was too reticent to actually ask for help, because I thought, you know, these people, they're busy. I don't want to bother anyone. And, you know, I can do this by myself, and I can just, you know, draft everything and look everything up on the internet and so on and so forth. And recently went back and just looked at my purpose statement, my statements of purpose and things that I sent out that first year. And I was like, wow, I had a lot of growth, you know, that needed to happen. I doubt that I got past, you know, the very first round of just, you know, all of the papers that get thrown in the trash that first time. And I thought I was just very naive to the process. And so after I got those first like rejections year one, which is a reality, you know, if you're thinking about PhDs, and you're applying to like good programs, like there is a possibility that you're going to take several years of sending out applications. You can't take those no's personally. But, you know, I wasn't expecting them. I'd never gotten no's on things before. And so like that one hurt. And then I was like, oh, I do need to ask for help. And so the second time around, I did ask for help from people, and I had people read through my statements of purpose and, you know, how I'm formatting everything. But world of difference between the very first year I did it, and then the second, and then the third year, because I kind of got caught in the COVID application cycle, which meant that many programs weren't accepting anybody during that time. And so thankfully, you know, I had time to wait and work on stuff. But, you know, your life can be on hold for a while if you're going to go into, you know, the several years of application cycles. So it's another thing to think about.
Yeah, no, I very similar, Dominic. My first year, I was like, I got this. This is fine.
Right? Yeah.
Promptly got rejected by everybody. So yeah, but definitely, I think Jenny Lieberman had just been hired kind of recently when I was applying, and she was a godsend. I don't think I would have made it. Her and Tim Donovan, and I think I bugged Betsy a little bit too. But having someone who's been through it, especially recently, not just look over your stuff, but kind of talk through to you about like, what is it these programs want? Like, I know you're doing your research in terms of, you know, like, what is this program asking of me? But I mean, that's kind of how it is when you get into a PhD. You know, you're in a lot of senses, you have mentors still, but you're kind of on your own. I would say too, in terms of kind of preparing myself and resources, just try to get as much experience as you can. Like if you can get a leadership position in ego or anything like that, because with the application process too, a lot of times they're interviewing you as well, right? So even if you can make it through all of the paperwork, you have that other level. So the more you can understand about what the field you want to get into expects, what the publishing prospects are there, what the program wants, the better off you are, because they're looking at these applications too. Like, does the student know what they're getting into? You know, will they be able to make it through our program and its expectations? Yeah, but yeah, always an extra pair of eyes, especially like Stephanie said, if it's somebody who just got off the market, because it's constantly changing.
Can I pile on to that? I'm sorry to like repeat again, but Sam's role in the Writing Center is a really great one, because most of the folks who get some kind of funding at the graduate, like the PhD level, end up doing a lot of teaching in the classroom. And it's really hard to get that teaching experience at an institution like UNF, where like the TAs don't necessarily have, they're not the instructor of record, but writing studio content translates really well in that interview process. And so I want to encourage you guys that if you're even remotely thinking about it, is there a way for you to volunteer at the Writing Center and get your feet wet? That's really useful. The second thing I want to say is that I didn't take the advice I'm about to give you, and I deeply regret it. Do not endeavor a PhD on your own dime. Get like a PhD paying for it out of your pocket, especially in English, will not pay for itself. So don't go if you don't have a funding package with a stipend and tuition waiver. That was really dumb of me at the time, but I was just so like Misty and Dominic, I also applied a whole year, sent out 10 applications and got 10 no's. And then the next year I sent out 10 applications, got 9 no's, and in April got my only yes, but it was without a funding package. And I was so delighted that I just accepted it no matter what, and had to like finagle my way into a funding package in my second year, which I did. It could be very persuasive, but I really actually needed it year one, the moment I walked in the door. And that is part of getting that advice early on in the PhD application process, because you need to be a compelling enough candidate, not just for the admissions. You don't just need the yes, you need the yes, and here's some money and a tuition waiver. That's what makes this field doable.
To tack on to that as well, I know you have other questions, Sam, but money is really important. Know your value. We just talked about like, you know, how difficult it can be to get exactly what you want when you finish. And a lot of times you got to take steps to get there as well, even when you finish. And I think this, I don't want to say is unique to my situation, but the program I was in, we got a stipend, we got tuition waivers, but we also had the highest fees in the SEC. So even asking about things like that, because I think we did the math and it was almost a quarter of my paycheck was going right back to the school. So when they make you these offers, even if you're getting some of the goods, you still want to ask about things like that because they can put you right back. Sorry, had to get that out there. We mounted a number of protests and started a union in response. So it's kind of a deal.
We protested at Georgia State for the same kind of fee reduction and we got it, thank God. But, you know, for the first 2 years of my 6 years, we paying out the nose.
Yep.
Wow, thank you. No, I think that's really important. And I think that does make the MA application process so different from the PhD process, is that you're also asking for money. And so that's like another component. Yeah, Dr. Gabbard had to pull me back from from being in debt for MA programs. So that I appreciated that because I really wanted to go. But yeah, I really appreciate that. And I think like just I really appreciate, you know, the transparency in applying and receiving those no's, and also trying to find a program that's, you know, right for your field of study, right? Because that's very important to kind of know who's there, and to read like their literature. I know I was told that to kind of like have correspondence with some of those professors. Is that also kind of typical, or like just trying to figure out who is there and who you're interested in working with?
Absolutely. Yes, because at the PhD level, what happens is the admissions committee has all these packets and they cut out all the ones that are like the first round cuts. And then they take the stack of 20 Victorianists or aspiring Victorianists and they take it to the Victorianist professors and say, who do you want to work with? And if you do not demonstrate in your portfolio that you know who they are, you know what they do, and you can articulate how your work needs to be with them and how your work will benefit them as a scholar raising up new scholars, then that particular moment where the professor evaluates all of the people in their field that they might admit, you may not make that cut.
Wow.
Yeah, I know it can be really intimidating to be like, I'm just going to email this person who's like the biggest person in my field, but they're used to it. They want to know who they could possibly work with. I made the huge mistake of just researching online, but my program had not updated its website in like years because they had locked themselves out of it. So I did not have that conversation. And I got to campus, moved my entire life, and all the people I thought I was going to work with were no longer there. Yeah, highly recommend. I know it can feel kind of awkward and like, I don't want to bother this like superstar academic, but they would rather hear from you. I promise you that. And not to sound awful or judgy, But it also helps you in that the way they respond, or if they don't respond at all, it might not be somebody you want to work with, because you do depend a lot on your mentors being supportive, especially when you go looking for a dissertation chair. So definitely, like, I know it's scary. I know you don't want to bother anyone, but just start with that first sentence. Hi, my name's so-and-so. I'm thinking about getting into your program. Could you tell me XYZ, right? And it really gets a foot in the door. It gives you a leg up, and it gives you an idea of kind of what to expect if you really want to work with this person.
I see, this is something that I wish that, I had whenever I was applying. I did not, I emailed a couple people, but, I actually got advice from someone not to email. I took that advice and I didn't. But now, as I know more about the field, if I were to do it again, I definitely would be emailing people and trying to, build those relationships up as much as possible. I will say the thing that worked really nicely, not in place of emailing, but just make sure you know who you're targeting. What I did my year that, I actually kind of got everything together was I just made a spreadsheet, and it's hard to keep everything in line in your head. And I started going through like the main papers in my field and putting the names of the people into the spreadsheet alongside where their university was. And as soon as I got 2 hits or so on a university, I knew that that was like going up on my list of like where I wanted to apply to. And so that's kind of how I whittled down what seemed like an infinite number of options to apply to something that was manageable. And, anthologies sometimes are really great for that, or like we had a keywords for in disability studies anthology that had just come out that had a bunch of big names that worked in it. And I just flipped through those essays, grabbed those names, popped them into a spreadsheet. Most of them I knew or I had heard of, some I didn't. And that's how I ended up at St. Louis University. Was one of the people worked with Chris Gabbard at UNF on a project. And so his name came up, and then another person's name came up at St. Louis University. And I thought, oh, well, okay, no, there's 2 hits. And so researched the university more, found out they had a really good medical humanities kind of bioethics thing. And you just got to know, you have to know where people are, because that's what's going to set your application apart. Because, I had someone who was really on my side. I found this out later in the selection committee. He read my my paper that I submitted and like fought with people to have me accepted. They only accepted 2 people. So yeah, I'm without that, I wouldn't have gotten in. So, know who you're targeting and target them very specifically.
That's awesome, by the way, Dominic. What are the slots? Psh, dude.
Yeah.
Did that person know Chris? Is that why? Because
No,
he's such a
it
good
wasn't the
advocate,
other
man.
person. So the person who knew Chris Gabbard was actually in the bioethics department. So they were not the ones that were, they were not the ones making the decision. It was just once I got in, I built a relationship with him, and now he's kind of the main person on my committee.
Wow, that's awesome. And so it was 2,
yeah.
oh, sorry. It was 2 people within like the English field.
One was in English, one of them was in bioethics.
Okay.
Yeah. And so that told me like this is a place that would be they're doing work that I want to work on as well. Like my projects fit in with their stuff. So yeah.
That's awesome.
But the
Yeah,
spreadsheet
UNF's
is big, that spreadsheet when you make it, a lot of names. But anyways, go ahead.
just UNF's faculty is fantastic, and they're very well known in their field. They are connected, they are out there in the world. So if you are in a field that you're interested in, or you're in a class that you're interested in, you think this is the one that I might want to pursue, that's the professor to ask the question. I mean, I went into Southern Studies, and so I went straight to Keith Cartwright, and he said, well, actually my buddies at LSU and at Alabama and at GSU, and these connections are excellent opportunities to have a advisor put you in contact with the professor at that institution, right? So, Keith could drop an email to, the McCaneys at GSU and say, hey, one of my grad students might be applying your way. And then, right, if I make it past that first round and the McCaneys are looking at my document like, oh, this is Keith's graduate student. It's like they already recognize my name. And so that, like, do not miss the opportunity to ask your professors who are teaching the classes you in the fields you want to pursue where they recommend you should apply. Because that, I hate to say, but it's not a meritocracy. Academia is not a meritocracy. It is 100% who do you know, who is called, who's paved the path before you. And you have great resources at UNF, so use them, man.
I think we have a question in the chat.
Oh, Erica, that's a great question about the MFA.
It's a heavy question.
It is.
Yeah. Go ahead, Stephanie. I think you.
No, Misty, you can take this one first.
So LSU definitely had an MFA program. There was a lot of back and forth between my MFA colleagues about, do I get the PhD or do I not? I think there are only like, what was it? It's less than 10 PhD MFA programs in the country. I want to say it's like 3 or 6, a multiple of 3 maybe. I don't know, but there are not a lot. So it is really hard to get into it, especially if you want to get into the Iowa Writers Workshop, right? Which that is the dream, right? The PhD, so from what I understand, it's more workshopping, of course. So you're getting that. You're also getting, especially if you get into something like the Iowa Writers Conference, you're getting that attached to your name, just by virtue of it's difficult to get in there. You're also getting more connections, because odds are good if you're in one of those programs with other people, there are also people who are getting out there, putting their stuff out there. Again, not a meritocracy, but in academics, if people know you're good to work with, you're dependable, you are in the conversation, right? Like academics, MFA or not MFA, it's all about being in the discourse. They know you're there and you're present. To directly answer the question of a practical teaching standpoint, I've known people with MFAs who have published amazing books, who have gotten tenure track jobs, but it's because they published like crazy and we're going to a ton of conferences, right? So the PhD can do things for you in that sense. If you're thinking, I went tenure track, I want to be at an R1, but you can also theoretically, or from what I've seen, get those same things if you take kind of the other path of, I'm just going to publish a lot and be really present in the discourse.
May I add 2 things to that real quick?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, this is just what I've seen with my colleagues.
Yeah. So I just want to remind everybody that there's like 30% of the people who are teaching college get a tenure track position. So your question around like MFA versus PhD should also be factoring into that. Statistically, the likelihood is that you end up in a position that is not tenure track. Statistically, likely not at an R1. And so if that's the case, then your question is, am I getting the PhD because I want to make myself competitive for a permanent contract kind of position that may or may not be tenure track? Or am I getting the PhD because I think that that's going to qualify me for a tenure track position at an R1? An R1 is going to require the publishing above all, but I've even seen at R1s them start to move away from a MFA only. And that is because there are so many PhDs in creative writing these days because the market has been so terrible. So they just stayed in graduate school and got the PhD to fund the writing, right? And so now they can start to demand the PhD. And this is simply a supply and demand concern. There's no ideological reason behind this because if you're a writer, an MFA is absolutely, undoubtedly a terminal degree, and you are absolutely qualified to teach at the college level with an MFA. But that's not the market, and so that the sort of like market logic is bringing to bear here. I'll also say, at some of your lower ranking institutions, your teaching tracks, your directional schools like University of North Georgia, University of North Florida, where I am right now, we have recently consolidated and we're a teaching school where 60% of our promotion and tenure is dependent upon our teaching quality. And they, as a desire to elevate the rigor, perceived rigor of our institution, have ceased accepting MFAs as qualifying terminal degrees to achieve tenure and promotion. And I have people who have been on the tenure track grandfathered in who will never, ever, ever be able to promote because they only have an MFA. So I'm sharing this because this is a very sticky question. That's why we all sort of like cringed when you asked, because it's so sticky right now. I would want to know what you want to, when you say strictly teaching, like practical teaching point, is this a desire to simply get in front of students, even if it's in a, lecturer, non-tenure track position? Then absolutely an MFA is going to qualify you for those kinds of positions. If you're interested in something a bit more prestigious or a bit more like tenure track, the movement is either you're like Natasha Trethaway with an MFA or a PhD in hand and maybe a book or two.
Yeah, that was a good question. It's a hard question to even think about, let alone answer, because there are a lot of factors with that one.
Yes, thank you so much for that. That was really informative. And obviously, like through the MFA program, we were told, oh, this is a terminal degree, so you can get this great illustrious position with it. Like, don't worry about your PhD. Had I taken that into full consideration, I probably would have made a different selection. However, the experience was great, and 'tis life. But this is all very incredible information.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Yeah. Thank you all for speaking on that. I didn't know if maybe, kind of talking about these challenges, talking about the application process, something that maybe makes the PhD track a little like different than the MA, and kind of the maybe something that's been a really positive aspect of it, and something that you have found as like a positive that it's come out of it that's different than being in graduate school for the master's degree at UNF.
So
Dominic, I'm looking at you.
No. So the question you're asking like what's something positive that's unique about a PhD as opposed to.
Yeah, I'm sorry. My brain is like not
No,
working.
I
Okay.
understand.
Yeah. Because I guess because I was
Yeah.
thinking, because like myself and like other, graduate students, like we, TA classes, which is of course a different thing,
Mhm.
but the difference of like just TAing and helping out with the class versus kind of running classes and being really intense into your studies. So that was where my mind was going.
Yeah, so one thing that I found just like pleasantly surprising about where I am now is that they give you a lot of teaching right away. And that's been fantastic. So like, well, I had teaching experience because I did adjunct work right after graduating from UNF, and then I also did some adjunct work in Peru at a university. And so, I had teaching experience, but my first year here, I've been popped into like medical humanities courses, specific things to like what I'm studying, which is different than anything that I've had beforehand. So, just the chance to teach and to, it's not always year one, but next year I'm teaching a film and culture course on just like disability narrative. And that's also in my field of study. And so, when you start to not just teach, but be able to really design courses to, what it is that you're really interested and passionate about, that's that's really, really valuable experience, one. And two, just a blast. Like, I guess if you're terrified of the idea of teaching, then maybe that's another thing, that maybe another sign that the PhD might not be might not be something that you should go for. But I absolutely love it. And so if I end up with, a teaching track job, which I probably will, then I'm happy with that. And I know that I enjoy doing those things. So teaching is definitely different. That's my quick answer. If I think of something else, I'll jump in though.
Yeah, definitely just getting experience for me. At UNF, when I'm thinking about just the masters, I was a TA, so I got to learn a bunch of cool stuff. Especially since we were just kind of figuring out like what the TAs were doing. It was like, well, let's try this, so let's try that. And it was really fun and really informative. But when I got into my PhD, not just with the experience, but also being a student, you get a whole different kind of freedom. Like at UNF, we kind of said, okay, this is what 1101's like. Whereas in my program, it was like, okay, just make sure you work towards these student learning outcomes and like have fun, do what you want, right? So that was really cool. Also just kind of getting to what was I gonna say? Oh, my actual research, getting to do what I wanted to do for my research. Like you still have some coursework you have to do, but once that's done, it's just like, okay, what's the book you want to write? And that's your dissertation. It's still stressful, but it's something you want to do. And you kind of just fly with it. I would also say where I lived was pretty cool. So I got my PhD at Louisiana State. In the first 6 months, I lived in New Orleans. And it was hard to juggle being a PhD student and wanting to be on Bourbon Street or Magazine Street every other night. But it was just really awesome to, especially if you haven't lived anywhere other than Florida or Jacksonville, to experience a whole new place. You're meeting other people who are kind of in the same situation as you that have come from a bunch of different places. And it's just kind of like a really fun life experience, to be able to like, I'm going and I'm doing this thing and like, whew, let's go. So that was the thing I really enjoyed.
Yeah, both of those were exactly my experience. I will say that I felt like, so my time at UNF was as a commuter master's student after finishing my undergrad at Florida State. And so I was working full time and going in the evenings to finish my master's degree. So my going to the PhD, I moved to Atlanta. And it was the first time that my entire identity was wrapped up in what I was doing in school in a way that is very different from like, oh yeah, I'm an English major. I've been an English major on a campus before. Yeah, I've done that. But I mean, your studies, your independent research, all of your friends, how you work and make your money, everything is involved in this like community. And so the people that you ideally, if you're in a department that's collegial, and by the way, they're not all collegial, some of them are like cutthroat, hateful, competitive. So just again, talk to your mentors, ear to the ground. But and mine was thankfully very collegial and very supportive. And so the best friends I've ever made in my life were in my PhD program. And they're, like godparent to my child, right? Like this kind of, and the folks that are going through PhD programs, even more so than undergrad, even more so than masters, are just so widely diverse in terms of stage of life. And so we have students who had just finished they rolled straight from their, very much like Sam, right? Like rolled straight from their undergrad to their master's and they go straight into the PhD and they're still in their like mid-20s. I was there with folks who were in their 50s going back and getting their PhD. I was in my 30s there getting married and having a baby at that time. I had older colleagues who had high school age students who were in their 40s. Like your classmates are truly a slice of society. And that was really exciting because the conversations are just so much more enriching. I will say I did not teach until I got into my second semester after arriving, because again, I didn't go with a package. So I didn't have funding until after I was there for 2 semesters. And if you have never been the instructor of record before, it is overwhelming to teach for the first time and balance classes at the PhD level. It is overwhelming. So I want to be very candid. Like, I just had no teaching experience, and they were like, here's an 1101 and 1102, go. And here I am. So it was fine. It was fine, but it's a lot of work. And like I said, teaching, as everybody who's taught on this panel can tell you, is already consuming. But teaching as your primary job, and now this is a job that will get you letters of recommendation to apply for the career you want, and you're also going to grad school, your whole life is subsumed into the PhD. And it's amazing. The community is wonderful. And also it's consuming. It's consuming. But it was the best time of my life, kind of. Yeah. I mean, like, aside from the anxiety and panic attacks in the job market, it was the best time of my life.
Yeah. Do that, attending conferences, redrafting papers because you're trying to get published. I mean, it's all of your time is spent on different stuff you're working on.
Thank you so much. No, that's